We'll see if
Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by the legendary Jeff Yamashita, athletic trainer at Stevenson School, JV softball coach extraordinaire. Coach, thanks for being here today to talk to us about your journey and your career and the way in which your role in athletics helps us survive.
Well, good. Thanks for having me. Hopefully I can impart some wisdom and some insight today.
Definitely. Let's do this. A little bit different than I would normally ask a coach who is in a head coaching role. But I would like to know, because you're in a similar role as the athletic trainer and running that part of the program. But take us through the journey, man. How did you get here? What was that like as you came up as an athlete, as you went through your training, and how you ultimately, the steps it took to land here at Stevenson?
Well, I guess if you take it back to the beginning, right, you're a little kid and you play sports and you do everything in every season. And so once I got into high school, I realized I wasn't as good as I thought I was. So I played basketball and I really loved baseball. But the best part of baseball was stealing bases. So instead of playing baseball, I ran track. So I was an athlete and played basketball and ran track. Well, just being an average athlete, you go off to college and there's no way that you can continue to participate. But I wanted to do something, I thought, in the sports field, right? And so I ultimately landed in sports medicine sort of indirectly. Back in the day when I was in school, corporate fitness was a big thing. And recreation majors were being hired for corporations because of their management skills. And so they were running the program. So I thought I wanted to be a recreation major and get into the corporate fitness world. And I needed 3 units to maintain being a full-time student. And I took this elective class in sports medicine. And that's where I got started. It was just a full flip from being into managing sort of a corporate business in fitness to getting on the field, being with athletes again. So I kind of dove headlong into getting into the athletic training program at San Jose State. And I guess it was about my junior year. I thought, well, I'm going to be getting out of school in a couple of years. So how do I start looking for a job? And so what I did is in the summer of my junior year, I started working football sports camps. So I had a 6-week soccer camp that I worked with. And then I had a couple of football camps. One was at Watsonville High and the other one was at San Jose State. Jack Elway happened to be the head football coach at San Jose State at the time. And he ran a pretty solid, camp. And my sole purpose was to meet coaches and administrators in the area that were coaching at these camps. And I did that over 2 years, my junior year and in my senior year. My senior year was the year that John Elway graduated from Stanford, and it became the football camp with the Elways. So the previous summer, there was about 100 kids. The summer afterwards, there were like 300 kids. So there was a greater need for coaches and people to take care of all those kids. Well, I met Chris Pappas, who was the athletic director and one of the assistant football coaches. I think at the time he might have been the defensive coordinator at this camp. And we struck up this conversation over 2 summers. And that's how I got my first job. So their athletic trainer at about the 11th hour decided he wanted to take a job at a physical therapy clinic in Long Beach. And so there was almost an instant need for an athletic trainer. I applied for the job and I got hired at my first job at Monterey Peninsula College back in the day, 1983, where I worked there for 3 years. And so, when you start working and you get into the field, you have some more questions. You're just not very well versed in rehabilitation. Your evaluation techniques could be better. I just sort of had a lot of questions and felt like, oh, maybe I better go on to a graduate school and get a master's degree if I think that I might want to work as a 4-year college athletic trainer at some point, because you're going to need your master's degree. So I went to Temple University, finished most of my coursework. And then I got offered a job at a local physical therapy office. And so I ended up coming back prior to finishing my degree. Well, as part of that physical therapy job, we wanted to do some outreach to the high schools, right? And so we sent out our athletic trainers. There were 3 of us, and we did some time at Seaside. We did some time at Monterey, and we did some time at PG. I don't think we went to Carmel, but we did definitely went to Stevenson. And so I was tasked to work with Stevenson School when I got back from college. And after 20 years of roaming the sidelines at just Stevenson football, that's when Jeff Young said, "Hey, I want a full-time athletic trainer. And are you my guy?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I'm your guy." So that's how I got to here. So following a 20-year job interview with Jeff Young, a job was created, and I was hired here at Stevenson School about 10 years ago.
Well, that's a lot. So let's figure out how we're going to parse that. So one of the things I usually ask is, what did you realize right away you needed to figure out when you ended up in the role? And considering you had a brief stint in 1983 for 3 years, and you mentioned your techniques could have been a little bit better, you were learning on the job, and then you had, years working in the therapy office and working with patients, to then landing back here full time at a high school. Talk me through a few of the things, if you could offer this up, that were pretty apparent that you needed to figure out about working with that particular population when you landed in each of those roles.
Well, junior college was just kind of an extension of high school. A bunch of the kids were sort of adults. That was sort of an easy transition for me because I was still young, right? Fresh out of college. And so these kids are 19, 20, some of them 21 years old. And one of the things that I had to do in the junior college setting was separate myself from the kids, because I wasn't that far removed from what they were doing and what they were thinking and their social life and all that kind of stuff. And so that was the first thing that I had to do, was make sure that I was extremely professional around kids that were basically my peers. That was the biggest thing. Once I got into the physical therapy world, it was being able to have conversations with people that are in pain a lot, and never to remind them that they're in pain, but just trying to make them feel better. I made a lot of good connections within the community, just being a longtime Peninsula resident. So that was one of the things that I really enjoyed there. But the biggest thing was just making sure that that patients were listened to, and that I didn't make things worse, right, through the rehabilitation process, and then try to get them out of their sort of "I'm in pain" mindset. Once I got into the high school setting, now you no longer have those adult conversations, and so those are some of the things that I missed. I guess fortunately at the time that I started here, is I had a teenage daughter and a middle school age daughter, and so I felt like I was already sort of in tune with the younger population. But again, sort of fitting into more of a mentor role for the high school kids, I think, is one of the things that I really found that I needed to be able to do well, because, kids have all kinds of issues, whether they're completely physical, sometimes emotional, sometimes mental. And I had to learn that aspect of working with high school kids in the secondary education setting.
Yes, and I would guess that the cliche is not the right word, but the thinking that for most teams, the strength and conditioning coach is kind of the go-between between the student athlete and the coaches, and what's not being said or said. And I have watched you over the years with students in regards to your space being this safe place where they can talk about things. And we joke all the time that you're the kid whisperer. How would you say that the role of the I'm going to use the word auxiliary coaches and staff, right, in your role as the trainer or the strength coach, or people that are in those roles, help support the overarching program and the role that you have found yourself in often in regards to, helping deliver messages or to take messages back and forth that are being shared with you in that space?
Yeah, I've always, I mean, even back at MPC, I've always had an open door policy, and that the space is always welcoming, and that's regardless if you want to come in and sit down and eat lunch, or you want to come talk to me about whatever your injury is, or I had a kid in today, and she was just telling me how the end of her day went, right? Between class and trying to figure out what school that she wants to go to, and then the application process and what her parents think that she wants to go to. And so I've always had this sort of open door policy. And I think that creates an air of kids recognizing that I'm an okay individual, even though I'm an adult. I'm an adult, right? And that I treat them with respect, but I also hold them accountable. We have conversations about, okay, like if there's an injury, okay, you are injured. These are the things that I want you to do, and these are the things that I don't want you to do. How do you want me to communicate that with your coach? Do you want to do that, or do you want me to do that? I allow them to advocate for themselves if they want to have that conversation with their coach. And then I always have a follow-up that says, okay, Justin's supposed to come in to see you. What I want him to do today is 30 minutes of jogging and 10 40-yard sprints, but I allow the athlete to have that conversation with their coaches first, because I want them to be, self-advocates and be responsible in that regard when it comes to injuries.
Yeah, I think that's super important in regards to helping facilitate sometimes the challenge of dealing with the decision maker, so to speak, versus somebody that can walk alongside of them and help nudge them the direction that they need to go in a way that feels a little bit more supported, hopefully. We never had a full-time trainer until you got here. The two schools I was at prior, we never had a full-time trainer. We had a part-time one at the second school. It seems like certified athletic trainers are becoming not necessarily the norm, but we're definitely inching that way compared to when you first got into the business. Can you talk about the importance of the role and why people that are struggling getting themselves to the place where they have a full-time trainer can maybe make an argument to their school district or their principals or whatever? Why is it so important to have somebody that is in your role to work with not just the athletic teams on campus, but also anybody else that may be, nursing an injury of some sort?
Well, I think the biggest thing is as a coach, you have a go-to person that you can send an injured athlete to, and then you can still be a coach, right? Because in so many instances, a coach has to be everything, right? So they're trying to take care of 20 kids or 30 kids that are trying out for a basketball team, and somebody steps on somebody's foot underneath the basket and they sprain their ankle, right? And as a coach, it's like, okay, I'm still trying to run practice, but now I got to try to attend to this particular kid's needs. With a full-time athletic trainer, coaches are allowed to coach. So they can just be like, hey, Mr. Yamashita, Jimmy sprained their ankle. Can you take a look at him? They can go back to coaching, and they know that kid is going to get appropriate treatment. They're going to get evaluated. They're going to have a conversation, like in our instance. You can either have conversation with the health center, the nurse that's going to be on duty, the dorm parent that's on duty, and have a conversation with a parent. And so that coach knows that those things are going to all get taken care of. And then at some point I'll follow up with them and say, Jimmy sprained their ankle. They're going to be out for a couple of days. I'm going to reevaluate them in 2 days, and we'll go from there. So I think that's one of the most important things, is that coaches are allowed to coach. Other things too, especially, just being in the office all the time with the door open all the time, sometimes stuff doesn't get reported to a coach. And what they do is they'll come in after practice and say, oh, my calf muscle is killing me. I had to stop practice at the end, and then practice was over, and then I just left, and I didn't tell coach that I'd had anything going on. So now this is something that that I can do, right? And evaluate somebody, take a look at them, again, have those conversations with the correct people, and then allow the coach to know what was going on with that person, even though they were completely unaware that anything had happened, right? And then again, maybe just emergency situations, where you have something that happens, and a coach comes across an injured athlete who was doing something they maybe not necessarily should have been doing, weren't there to witness anything that was going on, but can have a conversation with me that says, hey, can you come and take a look at this individual? We just found them lying on the ground and not really sure what had happened. So I think, it's sort of threefold: helping coaches, helping community, emergency situations.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm being honest, and with myself and with you, when I was at El Camino, we had conversations around having a trainer, and the talk track was kind of like, yeah, you know what? When you have them, all these kids end up hurt. And when you don't, like, people aren't hurt. And that was very naive at the time, from what I've seen in how things play out around here, where, yeah, you have, some kids that find their way in there for whatever purpose. But I think ultimately, with the safe space that kids feel that they're being attended to, you can kind of get to what the real issue is, rather than, whatever knick-knack that they're dealing with that becomes a bigger issue just because they're using that to mask whatever else is going on. So I think that's something that I've learned to appreciate greatly, in addition to those things that you just said. Let me ask this, and this could potentially be a landmine, so navigate it as you see fit. But what are some of the things that you encounter on a semi-regular basis, be it monthly, annually, every couple years, where the narrative in the media is one particular thing, but the reality of the situation is completely different, and you find yourself having to educate athletes, parents, coaches as to what the reality of the situation is versus, whatever is out there as the narrative that's being shared around?
Ooh, that's a great question. I guess what first comes to mind is the football helmet, right? Everybody feels that if they have the latest, greatest, according to whomever study that you read, is the greatest helmet, you will prevent concussions. And that's just not true, right? A helmet does not prevent concussions. The only thing that prevents a concussion is if you don't hit your head, right? And regardless of what helmet that you have. You foster questions all the time, like, my son wants helmet A because helmet A is the most protective helmet on the market. And what they base their judgment on is because it's the one that they see every Sunday afternoon, right? And so, oh, that one has to be the best because it is the one that I see on most of the players in the game on Sunday afternoon. Well, what they don't realize is the helmets that they see on Sunday afternoon, you and I can't get. They're custom made, they're 3D printed so that they fit correctly, and the ones that are being shown we can't get. And what we have access to is not any better than any of the other helmets. It's just the one that's more popular, and they listen to what their sons have to say about, oh, my son Jimmy wants this particular helmet because that's what he says he sees on Sunday, therefore it must be the best helmet. And that's not the case. That's my biggest one.
Hold on, I want to dig into that. So if you're basically saying that they're all the same, then yes, part of that is comfort level for kids feeling confident, right? And how does that play into it? And what would the message be? Because you're definitely not saying don't play football. You're saying, like, what? Hey, here's the reality of the space, and this is what you're navigating, and this is how to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, I mean, it might be a joke, but the kids are all about the drip. You look good, you play good, right? You look good, maybe you're going to get less hurt. I have not, I don't know, but right. But when you get the stuff that's more popular, therefore you look better, therefore you play better. If you get the right helmet, right, and I think the kids think this a lot too, is if you get the right helmet, you will not get a concussion, right? And I'm not, that's not the case, but that's what they think. So they want to go out and buy their own helmets, and yeah, that's just one of the things that they want to do. So
Well, there's no
I
harm
need
in
to be
that.
bulletproof. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely not. Right. And I'm a total, uh, I'm a total placebo guy. If a little spit and dirt works, then a little spit and dirt works, right? Regardless of the fact that it's a placebo. Well, I mean, now with all our turf, we don't have much dirt, but right, but I'm if it makes you feel better, I'm all about it, right? Some people think that it has to be concrete, and there's got to be evidence behind all this stuff, and I'm sort of old school, spit and dirt makes you feel better. Let's go. Yeah.
Well, I heard from one of our medical colleagues in the area one time that there's a art and a science to medicine, and sometimes you need the art and sometimes you need the science. And it sounds like you're a believer in that approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I read all the time, and I like to see what updated articles that I can find. I always peruse the American Journal of Sport Physical Therapy, AAOS, right, American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. I read all their articles so that I can try to be up on whatever the latest research is that says about whatever, from a rehabilitation protocol, from surgical procedures to new assessment techniques. Right, I try to read as much as I can. We're in an evidence-based profession, and you want to be able to prove what you're telling people, based on good outcomes of good studies.
No doubt, no doubt. So let me ask you this. Your profession, let's call it, in addition to physical therapy and the way in which we rehabilitate people or do preventative medicine, lots of toys out there. What are some of the ones that you have found to be most significant in moving the needle in a way that you can measure versus, hey, that looks really cool and it's got a bunch of bells and whistles, but we haven't really seen the same impact? Can you run through a couple of things that if people had Christmas tomorrow and then they could get some things to help their space and their room and their toolbox, things that you found that are productive versus maybe some that you haven't found a ton of success with?
Yeah, I like the from a cold cryotherapy standpoint. I really like the Game Ready. I think that the ice and the compression being maintain the correct temperature with the compression has been really successful in my knees and my ankle rehabilitation, recovery thing. The kids love the Normatec. I think the Normatec feels great. I like the Normatec. It makes me feel immediately better with that sequential pumping. Those are the two big things. Cupping seems to be very valuable, right? I really like the cupping now, especially sort of around the neck and back and the shoulders. I think works really well. I grew up in the world of ultrasound and electrical stimulation, and I'm using. I could have purchased an ultrasound machine, and I chose not to. I do use some electrical stimulation. I think that's good for pain management. I'm not so positive about swelling control, but for sure, pain management I like a lot. Those are my modalities that are kind of my go-to modalities. From an exercise standpoint, I'm really like a multi-level single arm pulley guy. And so if I can move a pulley up and down, I can do lots of different exercises. I can do however you think that whatever functional training, however you call that. I think I can do some things with that multi-pulley system. So yeah,
Good. No,
Normatec.
that's helpful. I think ultimately, you and I talk all the time about trying to maximize the space that you have and provide opportunities for you to have your best modalities. And you just reminded me, we talked earlier about this pulley system. We haven't executed on that. So that's on the list when we're done. But I'm also curious just in regards to how you maximize like kind of the minimum effective dose, right? What are the things that you need to be successful at keeping kids healthy? And you could have every tool and trick in the trade, but what percentage are they being used? And everybody has a different budget and accessibility based on their school site. So I think those are great things to offer for people who are looking to maybe upgrade their space. I want to pivot. So you spend a ton of time, obviously, at games, but also walking around practice, checking on different teams, just being there around the physical space and watching interactions between adults and kids. I would love to get your list of, hey, these are the best things that I think people do in regards to coaching that can be adopted and have transferability regardless of the discipline. These are the things that I see on a regular basis or I see on occasion that really move the needle, really land well with kids, really upgrade somebody's coaching approach. Because you probably get to see more people out there than any of us. And I'm curious what your thoughts are that you can offer for people that are listening. Like, hey, these are the things that I think really push buttons, the way in which people can really, help teach and coach kids.
One of the things that I see a lot of is you kind of wander around and a kid will, well, I don't know if making a mistake is the correct term, or that their assignment is to do a particular thing, and the outcome is not correct. And then what happens, you get a lot of time is you must do this particular thing. So it's like, the biggest one is the one that always kind of hits home is the defensive end in football. You've got to stay outside, right? You've got to stay outside. And so what happens is that's the messaging, is you have to stay outside. Well, what happens if I don't know what that means? What happens if the guy that's in front of me is physically bigger than I am? How do I make sure I stay outside? And so we've had a couple of coaches that once that is said by maybe the head coach or the defensive coordinator, that somebody else will pull them aside and say, hey, this is how you gain leverage on that particular individual. This is how you use your hand to push their hand off of you. This is how you use a swim move. This is a technique that you can use versus some coach is being told to stay outside, right? Stay in your gap. Is that having an assistant coach that can actually physically teach a kid, hey, this is how you do this particular thing, right? Whether it's lacrosse or whether it's field hockey, it's the nuances of the coaching of the aspects of coaching that I think are really valuable from an assistant coaching standpoint, right? Having somebody that's knowledgeable about the game, being able to teach those little nuances, what a head coach is telling you, stay outside. This is how you stay outside.
Yeah, and if you take that concept and you look at your role as the JV softball coach, how would you say the things that you're learning out there, coaching to that particular demographic, you feel or see or know that could translate to our colleagues if they were to adopt them? What are some of the things you've gained out there that you would like to offer us? Just like, hey, you know what? I'm coaching at this level, and this is what I'm encountering. If people in general were to think this way, this would allow them to move a little quicker.
Well, you've got a bunch of JV softball kids, and my group of kids, sometimes they've never put a glove on their hand before, and they come out and they try it because it's not tracks, it's not running, it's not lacrosse, so I'm not going to get hit, it's not swimming because that's too hard. And so they come out and they try softball. And I always joke that my kids don't get 1% better, they get exponentially better from a day-to-day thing. I'm a big rah-rah guy, and so I like to celebrate those wins with those kids, right? So some can't throw it 10 feet, and then the next day they can throw it 10 feet, but they still can't catch it. And then the day after that, they can throw it 10 feet, and then they can kind of get a glove on it. And then the next day they can throw it 10 feet and they catch it once, right? And for me, I celebrate all those little wins every day. From a skills standpoint, I try to be consistent. And every day, this is what we're going to start our day with. We're going to start with, a jog around. We're going to get a warm up. You're going to get your glove. You're going to start playing a little bit of catch. It's going to start close. It's going to get further away. And then we're going to do all these glove work. So every day, the kids know the first 15 or 20 minutes what's going to happen at practice. And it's awesome when I come out sometimes, if something happens and I'm getting somebody ready for a practice and I come out and they've already gotten started without me there. So they know what their first 15 or 20 minutes of practice are going to be. So patience, celebrate everything, and keep it simple, right? Keep everything consistent so that they know exactly what is expected of them every day.
So we've talked about this before in our side conversations in regards to I coached the middle school girls basketball team, and I coached the boys varsity basketball team for years as a way to help me maintain balance and keep perspective. Why do you think that what you just named, have patience, celebrate everything, why do you think that's so hard for coaches as they go up the proverbial ladder to keep that in mind?
Well, it comes down to the W's and L's, right? So your success is based on the number of W's that you have, right? Not in how many kids that you can get to play catch by the end of the year, right? So my end game is, can you play catch at the end of the year without hitting your partner in the shins or whatever, right? And so that's my end goal. But I think as you get up a little higher, then your success is based on your win-loss record, and not what the kids learn, and not the successes that the kids have. I mean, that's why I like the JV kids, right? Because it's not about the win-loss record. It's about the successes at the end of the year. Is everybody grinning? Is everybody having fun? Do they want to come back next year and do it again? Those are the successes at my level.
So when we coached 8 to 12-year-old softball those years ago, I learned a ton from that I've translated into basketball at this point. Are there things that you've noticed over the years observing other sports, thinking through the lens of, wow, man, they should go watch the water polo team practice because they could pick this up? Is there anything that stands out to you that has transferability? Because my soapbox on this thing is that people tend to feel that they can only learn from another coach who is a master of their discipline, where I look at it as like, look, everybody that's out here teaching something you could steal from. Any thoughts and ideas of things you could share that you feel translate?
Oh, for sure. I mean, nobody knows everything, and you can pick up tidbits from everybody. Regardless of what it is, right? I mean, some of the best things that I have learned happened after practices, with a conversation between a coach and a kid, right? There are expectations that you're at this practice. A kid rolled in, I can't remember if he rolled in late or probably rolled in late, didn't give the coach a heads up, and it happened outside of the office. And so that I heard the whole interaction, and I had to tell him, I'm like, that was a great conversation. You were stern with the kid. You told him what your expectations were. You told him why you weren't very, very pleased with what they had done. And then you hugged him and said, I'll see you tomorrow. I mean, it was really a great interaction, right? That came from a basketball coach, right? And again, you sit out here, and you listen to some of the things that go on the water polo in water polo practice, and I'm like, I like messaging A. I'm not so quite sure I like messaging B, from that particular, from a different particular individual. And like, okay, I will never message like Coach B. I will always message like Coach A, right? And so those are things that I pick up, is just mostly mannerisms, right? And the interactions that coaches have with kids.
No doubt. I agree with you. There's always something to be learned if you're looking and you're showing up, being curious and thinking about ways in which we could better ourselves in the profession that we've chosen. All right, let me go here. I usually ask, what is something you've most recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't have to be about being a trainer, being a coach. It can be about whatever, but I'm always curious. You said I read a lot, right? I challenge my beliefs. I'm constantly trying to grow. So growth mindset wise, what is something that you used to be over here and now you're over here, and here's why?
The biggest thing is I don't know how you put it, is trying to be less uptight over the little things, right? And we always talk about the paper cuts and how the paper cuts add up, right? And I am really trying consciously to make this effort to not allow the paper cuts to build up. And I think it's made me feel a little calmer. My head doesn't explode as often. And I think it's better in probably interactions that I have with people, and not allow them to be like, oh man, he wore that cap again. That's just bugging me. Right. And it's taken me years to get over that. Right. The little things that bother me about interactions that I have with individuals. So that's been a conscious effort.
Yeah, and on that, we talked about this over the last week and a half, where sometimes those paper cuts are the bigger deal because we never address them, or there's some sort of acute interaction that then leads you to collect paper cuts, where if you can either just put those down and acknowledge that that's your baggage, rather than this person's out to get me, it just makes the day so much better.
So much better.
Yeah, and we talked about
it takes decades to learn that.
well, well, that's what you said. I hope I can add some wisdom, and wisdom's not something that you can learn in a book. It's from experience and time. And I think it's something that all of us wish we could offer as a life hack, but people got to go through that on their own to get to the place where they're feeling their authentic self and can show up in that way. All right, let me wrap with this. If you were starting over today, what advice would you give to your younger self to either allow you to shortcut a few things and get to the wisdom we're talking about, and or position yourself or people that will follow in your footsteps to navigate kind of the struggles that come with the job?
So for sure, from a career standpoint, and I try to steer my students into this direction. I think the sports medicine students, their interactions with me are positive. I think they like me. They're like, oh, this is a really cool profession because you're around sports, and that's one of the things that I want to do because I wasn't good enough to play. But this is a way of keeping me within sports. And so that's how I got into the athletic training field. If I had it to do all over again, I would go to physical therapy school, because I could still do what I do in the sports field. But say, for example, I want to work with one of my buddies is a neurological pediatric physical therapist. He loves working with neurologically impaired pediatrics. He thinks it's the greatest, right? And that's not my area of training. And so that's not something that I could ever experience. What if I wanted to go into cardiorespiratory therapy? What if I wanted to go to respiratory therapy? What if I wanted to go into wound care? I mean, there are things that I can't do because I just don't have the credentials to do it. My role is orthopedic sports medicine stuff. So that's an area of focus where I call it have the blinders on, right? I can do one thing where there are all these other things, especially now, right? As I get to the age where you start thinking about retirement, would I take a part-time athletic trainer's job somewhere? I don't know. but could I do part-time neurological pediatrics someplace or wound care or something to that effect and be able to do that for a few more years? Oh, maybe. I don't know, but I don't have the credentials to do that. So I always talk the kids into the entry level. I'm like, hey, go to, well, I want to do what you do. Go to physical therapy school. Because if you go to physical therapy school, you can do a lot of things in a lot of different places, wherever you want to be, while you're looking for the job that I do. So that would be the thing that I would tell my younger self is at the time when my buddy was in physical therapy, I'm like, I don't want to go to physical therapy school. I want to work in sports, right? And so I didn't listen to what his perspective was on the career path, and I wish I would have back then, because I would have probably gone to physical therapy school.
Well, I think the message there is similar to the conversation that we had with Coop a few years ago when he was getting his master's, and it was like, hey, I want to get this master's in sports administration. And I was like, no, go get one in organizational leadership. It's a lot more transferable, and it's the same content for all intents and purposes, right? So you're like, cast a wider net. You can still focus in being a athletic trainer if you want, but if you have a broader degree, then you have more options.
Totally. And that's what I tell the kids in sports medicine all the time. Yeah, no, I want to do what you do. No, go to physical therapy school. You can find a job to doing what I do, but you will have a job in some aspect of rehabilitation services while you're searching for the job that you really want.
Yeah, and you see that a lot. I don't know if you're as aware of this as I am due to the conversations I have, but you often see potential / future coaches coming out of their undergrad with an exercise science degree or something similar because they want to coach and teach PE. And it's like, yo, those PE jobs don't come around very often, right? How are you giving yourself a chance to land, do what you want to do, and maybe when the time presents itself, you find your way into one of those jobs? But it sounds like it's a very similar deal from the lens that you're looking through it.
Totally. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And like we talked about, athletic trainers are becoming more and more prevalent in secondary schools, right? Because there has been a recognized need, for that career, but it's still a job that is still sort of narrowly focused.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a bill with the legislature right now that they're trying to push across the finish line that would mandate fully certified athletic trainers for all schools. So hopefully that gets done in a way that everybody can benefit from it the way we have. And appreciate you jumping on tonight in a pinch and finally getting us our first trainer on the podcast.
All right. Hopefully hopefully we had enough tidbits here.